This is Jocko Podcast number 153 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
Congressional resolution honoring the veterans of Helicopter Attack Light Squadron 3 and their families. Whereas Helicopter Attack Light Squadron 3, hereinafter in this resolution referred to as HAL 3, began its history as detachments of Navy Helicopter Combat Support Squadron 1, HC-1, which began helicopter gunship operations in support of Navy brown water special operations and Army units in the Mekong Delta of South Vietnam on September 19th, 1966. Whereas the detachments of HC-1 adopted the name Seawolves. Whereas HAL 3 was officially established on April 1st, 1967 in Vung Tau, South Vietnam, and was the only active-duty Navy helicopter gunship squadron in the history of naval aviation. Whereas during the squadron's existence, nearly 3,000 veterans of HAL 3 displayed extraordinary courage in support of United States military and political objectives in Vietnam. Whereas 44 veterans of HAL 3 gave their lives in support of military operations in the Mekong Delta, Vietnam. Whereas the extraordinary performance of the veterans of HAL 3 earned numerous unit citations, including 6 Presidential Unit citations, 7 Navy Unit commendations, 1 Meritorious Unit Commendation, a Republic of Vietnam Meritorious Unit Commendation, and the Vietnam Service Medal. Whereas the valor of the veterans of HAL 3 earned 5 Navy Crosses, 31 Silver Stars, 2 Legion of Merit medals, 5 Navy and Marine Corps medals, 219 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 156 Purple Hearts, 101 Bronze Stars, 142 Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Crosses, over 16,000 Air Medals, 439 Navy Commendation Medals, and 228 Navy Achievement Medals, making it possibly the most decorated Navy squadron during the Vietnam War. Whereas the maintenance and administrative personnel of HAL 3 contributed greatly to the success of the 9 HAL 3 detachments operating throughout the Mekong Delta, providing the detachments with superb maintenance, support, and logistics. Whereas HAL 3 flew over 130,000 hours of combat and logistical support. Whereas HAL 3 inflicted several thousand casualties on enemy forces. Whereas HAL 3 performed 1,530 medical evacuations. Whereas HAL 3 delivered over 37,000 passengers and over 1 million pounds of cargo. And whereas HAL 3 was disestablished in March 1972 at Binh Thuy, South Vietnam, as part of the Vietnamization program, leaving behind it a combat and humanitarian record recognized as bringing great credit upon the United States Navy and its role in the Vietnam War. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives, 1, honors the service, courage, and sacrifice of the veterans of HAL 3, 2, honors the families of HAL 3 veterans for their support. 3, expresses its condolences to the families and comrades of those killed in action. And 4, recognizes HAL 3 as a unique squadron in the history of naval aviation. And that resolution of recognition was made in 2010, actually 38 years after the Seawolves were disestablished in Vietnam. And that is a long time to wait for recognition. And this is because, well, for one thing, they weren't looking for recognition, but also to much of the world, the Seawolves were relatively unknown. For me, having grown up in the SEAL teams, I actually knew about the Seawolves. I knew about their reputation from the Vietnam era SEALs that held them in the absolute highest regard possible. And they were considered extremely courageous, sometimes beyond courageous. They were incredible pilots and highly aggressive gunners, and the teams that maintained and kept the aircraft flying in really horrible conditions. They were known for getting the job done. And there's one thing that always stuck in my mind when I heard stories about the Seawolves in Vietnam, and that was this: simply, if you called them, they would come. And it didn't matter if it was day or night, sunny skies or typhoon rains, a calm extraction or a hot landing zone filled with enemy fire. To the Seawolves, none of that mattered. What mattered is that the troops on the ground needed help. And if you called the Seawolves, they would come. And it is an honor today to have one of these men here with us to tell us about this relatively unknown, but at the same time, legendary squadron of naval aviation. Helicopter Attack Squadron Light, HAL 3, the Seawolves. And we have Dennis Rowley, naval officer, naval aviator, and of course, Seawolf. Sir, absolutely honored to have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Jocko, I thank you and you, Echo, for the opportunity to be here. It's it's something that I didn't want to do. You hear the old saw about you don't talk about the war, and I think that's true of most all of the guys that I knew and flew and fought with. We just don't talk about it except over a beer in a bar somewhere with guys we've trusted our lives to. However, my wife, Stinky, and my son and daughter, when they heard about this opportunity, told me, you got to do this. You got to help keep the reputation of the Seawolves alive. And I don't think that reputation needs a lot of build-up on my part. But I'm here to honor the 44 of our brothers who weren't able to come on back with us. And I'm here to help share a little bit of history about the squadron. And I'm here to thank every one of you swinging dick gunners who helped me get my little pink body back without any additional holes in it. Those guys are phenomenal. I mean, they're really something. But we'll get into that. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm still scratching my head as to why I'm here, because you guys have giants on this show. You just had a fella who was a highly decorated Marine infantry officer. He went on to get a law degree. He went on to work in the VA. He became the Secretary of the Navy. He became a congressman from the great state of Virginia. And, oh, by the way, was a little-known candidate for president of the U.S. And party politics aside, this country would have been better off if Jim Webb had been our president.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And I can say that not from, just a casual reading of his bio. I know Jim because he was a classmate of mine at the Naval Academy. I know Jim because he was a company mate of mine at the Naval Academy. And I know Jim to be the kind of a man that I would hope my son would become. Mm-hmm. Just a great guy. I can also say that I know Jim because for a brief time, plebe summer, we roomed together. So you're looking at one of the only guys that you'll ever meet who is proud to share the fact that he slept with the Secretary of the Navy. So yeah, we're here to spread the word and have a little fun. The one thing that was really important about recent past is a Seawolf reunion. We have reunions every couple of years, and now mini reunions more frequently. But this one was pretty special. It was about 2 months ago. We were gathered on the flight deck of the Midway for the premiere of a documentary called Scramble the Seawolves. They had a big inflatable screen on the flight deck, and we were all up there laughing and scratching. One thing that I noticed about the entire experience is, man, all those guys look old now. I mean, yeah. But the movie, the documentary was very well shot. It's actually being released on KPBS and PBS, and I assume that shortly after that it'll be available on YouTube. But it gave us a sense of pride, and I think I can speak for everyone that it gave us a little greater sense of belonging based upon the fact that our story could now be told.
Yeah, no, that's I've watched it, and anybody can watch it. You can, if you Google "Scramble the Seawolves" KPBS, it'll pop up, and you can watch it. It just, there's no email to sign up for. It's free. That's how you can watch it. Let's talk about the Seawolves. Let's talk a little bit about your past, because I think starting with your dad being a pilot, and let's start with that and what that was like growing up.
Well, my dad would really be pissed off at you for calling him a pilot, because Dad was an aviation ordnance chief. And he knew that the guys in the back were doing the job and the guys up front were just steering the bus. No, my dad, William John Rowley, was a hell of a guy. He was an interesting man. And that's the nicest thing you can say about somebody, I think. Dad was the kind of a guy who could walk into a room and full of strangers, and an hour later walk out and everybody thought he was their new best friend. Good guy, great guy. But he comes from a long line of warriors. My grandfather, who married my grandmother from Hilo, he fought in World War I. I have a wonderful picture at home of my mom and her three brothers taken during World War II. And Uncle Walt is there in his Marine Corps uniform. Uncle Bob is there in his Navy blues. And my Uncle Jim is there in his Army Air Force uniform. Yeah. And then when World War II broke out, my dad and his brother, my Uncle Herb, both joined the Navy. Dad went on into aviation ordnance and came out the other end of the pipe after peace as one of the last of the Tojo chiefs, a guy who made chief in a little over 3 years. He's an interesting fellow. And leadership lesson number one for me was the way he helped me grow as I was coming up. You would think that a chief petty officer in the Navy can be very gruff and directive. And they can, and they are, when it's required. But Dad never told me, go do this. He'd say, have you ever considered? Have you ever thought about? Have you ever? And he brought it into practice one day when I was just getting ready for college and trying to decide where I was going to go. He had just come back from a med cruise, and he had one of his JOs, a pilot, a Naval Academy grad, invite me over to his house for dinner. And, I thought that was a little strange, but I was pretty excited about it. The guy came and picked me up in a brand new yellow Corvette and took me over to his home and introduced me to his drop-dead gorgeous Swedish wife. Now, Dad didn't have to say, you should go to the Naval Academy for the experience in learning leadership. He brought it down to a level that I could understand.
Yeah. You thought you'd get issued a Swedish wife?
Well, actually, what I wanted, Jocko, was somebody 5'8", 5'9", long, straight blonde hair, good head, bitch and bod, witty, completely intelligent, and imbued with the mating instincts of a wild mink in heat. But what the good Lord saw fit to pair me up with was Stinky, and she's a stumpy little brown-haired girl that's just ornery as a sack of wildcats. So, ain't it funny how it all works out?
So you go meet this pilot, and did that flip the switch in your head?
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a naval aviator. It's just something that I wanted. I had initially had dreams of going in and flying SPADs. That one was just a hell of a weapons carrier and a close air support mission that was non-parallel in my way of thinking. They got a lot of guys out of the shit. But that didn't work out because the aircraft was being retired as I was going through flight school. The thought of going to the Naval Academy was always intriguing to me. I didn't know that I'd be able to make that. But I was one of the, I'm sort of large, and I was one of the only Navy dependents who were into athletics at Kubasaki High School on Okinawa, where I went through all 4 years of high school. And the senior naval officer on the island had roomed with Wayne Harden, the football coach at Navy. They did a quick scout and told me to take a competitive exam, and I'd be considered for the academy. I had a year to waste while I was waiting to get into the academy, so I went to Berkeley. This is in the 1963-64 school year, which was very colorful. Mario Salvo was up there doing his dirty word movement on the steps of the administration, but it was ugly. My parents lived across the hill in Walnut Creek, California, and every time the news was over, I'd get a frantic call from my mother. Are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah, Mom, I'm okay. Yeah. But at any rate, following that year at Berkeley, I received a presidential appointment, and even though he had been assassinated, John Kennedy's signatures was on that. Yeah, and I went back to Navy, fell in love with crew, and I can honestly say that if it hadn't been for rowing at Navy, I probably wouldn't have made it through. I probably would have quit, which is something that you would have been pissed off about.
I would have been. Yeah. And why is that? Because it gave you something to focus on? It gave you an outlet?
Exactly. Crew is hands down the greatest team sport that you can imagine. If even one person is not pulling their weight, is not exactly in sync, the rhythm of the boat suffers. It'll be dragged down, and everyone will know exactly the reason for that. You can tell by the size of the puddle, the way the boat is set. It's phenomenal. So it's a great lesson in group leadership, in that everyone has to be a leader in that shell to put the maximum that they can into it to make the boat move. If you get a chance, read a book called The Boys in the Boat.
Okay. I've heard of that book.
It's got great insight into what rowing's all about. And you guys should be up on other sports.
So you row at the Naval Academy. How was your since you kind of grew up in the Navy, your dad was a chief, you must have been at least somewhat prepared for the shock and awe of drill instructors and upperclassmen and all that stuff.
It wasn't the drill instructors or the upperclassmen. It was the chicken shit. I had a guy in our company that just hated me, and he'd stand me up in the passageway, and he had a plastic baseball bat and beat me in the chest with it. Yeah, it's a non-event, thunk, thunk, thunk. But if I saw that guy again, I would rip his head off because it was just so juvenile. I was a couple of years older than my classmates for a number of reasons. I flunked kindergarten. But at any rate, it was, you just don't do things like that. There's no leadership lessons. There's no benefit to be had from some of the stuff that was going on in there. But when I got out there on the water with my teammates, it all just went away.
Yeah, there's something to be learned from having to put up with such crap. And I think there's two ways people go with it. Sometimes they go with like, oh, I'm going to be able to do that one day and give people a bunch of shit about whatever. And some people go, okay, I'm never going to act like that.
Yeah.
Oh. And then so you were Jim Webb's roommate, plebe summer?
Just for a few days, but we were in the same company for all 4 years. Yeah, and he's a heck of a guy.
Yeah. No, it was awesome. It was a real honor to have him on here. And, he told a similar story, and he wrote about it in some of his books, which was, a guy just smacking him in the ass with some kind of bat.
It was our song book.
and they're telling him he needs to say, just admit that it hurts, and he wouldn't admit it.
Yeah.
But same thing, he's kind of like, he what did he say? He said, I don't hold anything against those guys that did that to me, but I remember their names. So
Yeah.
I think they made the list for Jim Webb.
Yeah.
And then how did you end up picking? So you already automatically knew you wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And was that hard to get selected for that?
No, it was a service selection is done based on class rank, and I graduated in the top 10% of the bottom third of my class, and that was sufficient to get me into aviation. Since I couldn't fly the SPAD, I really wanted to go jets. Sorry, guys, I have to admit that. But due to my size and my anthropometric measurements, if I had to punch out, I would have left my knees on the glare shield of the trainers.
How tall are you?
6'4".
Yeah, big.
Yeah.
This was, clearly, and Jim Webb talked about this when he was on the podcast. He was the guy in charge of hanging up the names of the guys that had been killed. And yet, when I had Charlie Plum on, who graduated, I think, in 64, or he showed up in 64. No, graduated in 64. Vietnam wasn't even on the radar for them. And for you guys, it 1967, 1968, it had to, you had to have known, okay, I'm going to fight in Vietnam.
When you walk into Mother B, Bancroft Hall, you go into the Rotunda, which is a very large open area. And when we started losing our former classmates, the graduates, I'm sure Jim explained, but you put a poster board up there with a picture out of the lucky bag and a brief bio and not a description, but where they died. And initially it was just onesies, twosies, but pretty soon the march went all the way around the Rotunda, and they had to move it up into Memorial Hall. And it really brought home the fact that this is serious. This is you're making up your minds whether or not you want to dedicate your lives to the defense of this country, and it might come at a considerable cost. Mm-hmm. And for 44 of our brothers, it certainly did. 44 Seawolves didn't make it back. And I'm sort of an emotional guy. But one of the few times that I've really cried, openly and unashamedly, was at the wall. Seeing a couple of my gunners up there just really brought it home to me. Amazing people gunners are.
So that's what you're getting into upon commissioning. And so you get commissioned and you graduate in 68, your class of 68?
Right.
And then you go to Pensacola, Florida. Is that where you go to flight school?
That's right.
And that's what you talk us a little bit through the flight school path. You show up, you learn to fly what, a T-38? Is that what you learn on?
No, you start out on a T-34.
Okay.
And there's been a change in the way they instruct naval aviators now. When we were going through, you had to do the fixed-wing flight syllabus first before you could get into helicopters. And then you'd go through the helicopter syllabus. And then after that, those of us that got orders to Vietnam would go up to Fort Rucker, and the Army would instruct us in tactics, in armament systems. They did a good job in prepping us, and then send us overseas, and the rest of it would be done in country. So the training that we received along the way was excellent, but a lot of it was just like back at the academy. They told us that, hey guys, the education you receive here at the United States Naval Academy costs the taxpayer approximately $250,000, which was a lot of money back then. And our reply was, yeah, but you stick it up our butts a nickel at a time. So, you know.
So now you're in the pipeline for helicopters. Had you heard of Seawolves at this time? Were you hearing about it? Is it something that you said, oh, I want to go do that?
We were just starting to hear about it. And, it wasn't fully developed in my mind. That's where I wanted to go. But it quickly became, there is a a purpose for every element in the military, from the guys who swabs the decks all the way on up. But I didn't want to be a bus driver. I didn't want to be a guy who bored holes in the sky. So this being a Seawolf immediately appealed to me as an opportunity to be able to, I don't know, to pay back. It's a funny thing, and I'll jump ahead a little here. But I have a cousin who is very close to me. She's like a sister to me. And I'd never really thought about questions like you just asked, but immediately after I got back from Vietnam, she was driving me on out to family home in Walnut Creek, California. And without taking her eyes off the road, she said, "How can you do it?" And I thought about that for just a minute and said, well, it was pretty easy. I went over there to bring as many of our guys home safely as I could. And in some ways I failed. In some ways I succeeded. But that's it. I was enough of a student to understand the domino effect, certainly. But that wasn't in my thinking. You're thinking sort of 10 yards, 10 yards. But in the air, it's a little more expansive. It's the guys that you're flying with, the guys in your fire team, the guys on your deck, the guys who are the maintainers back in Ben Tui. They're the guys you think about, and that's why you do it.
Okay, so did you get to select? You get done with the training. Did you get to select? Hey, I want to go to the squadron in Vietnam.
Pretty much, yes.
Was there a long list for that group?
There were. I'm sure
awesome.
there were more volunteers than got accepted.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the mechanics of that. I asked for it, and I got it.
And how did that look like showing up in Vietnam?
I was the only officer assigned to the Seawolves who took that reverse freedom flight on into Saigon. And I got there, and they shuffled me off to the Annapolis Hotel, which I thought was a little unusual. But, I had a couple of days to kill because there wasn't any transport down to Ben Tui. And I knew a dear friend of mine who was in Det 2 at Na Bay, and he'd got over there before I did. So I figured, Na Bay, that's not too far away. I'm going to go visit him. And the next morning, I check out a 45, put it in my gym bag. I'm in civvies. They didn't like us roaming around town in onesies in uniform. So I jumped on a Navy bus out to Na Bay. And I was having a great time talking to the guys at the Det there and learning a little about what's going on. And comes time to leave, and it's probably about 16:30. And I say, well, I better get back. And they say, well, you just missed the last bus. But don't worry about it. You can take a pedicab. So here I am, brand new in country. I've got the zipper in my on my gym bag open with my hand very close to it, and this Vietnamese fellow is pedaling away, taking me back to the hotel. It took us about an hour to get back there, and I tipped him generously because I'm not a light fellow. I was a lot lighter then. But, here I am, my first day in country, and I'm going to get greased. So, yeah.
Hey, tell us, if you wouldn't mind, some of about the formation of the Seawolves, because it's a very cool story about the Mekong Delta, about the way the way the enemy moved through the Mekong Delta and through the Rung Sat Special Zone, and there was no roads, and the only way to get around was water. If you want to maybe expand on that, just so people can kind of get a feel for what started this whole thing off.
Sure. The Mekong Delta is fed by waters from the Himalayas. It comes on down and spreads out into a broad quasi-oceanic area. Basically, it's mud and crap and brown water, and hence the brown water navy. But at any rate, there are very few roads that do anything but connect major cities in the Mekong back then. And consequently, just about all the traffic moved by sampan or junk, and that's the way people got around. The infiltration that the NVA and the VC practiced came largely either on foot, by bicycle, or by boat. In order to counteract that, Task Force 116 was put into place. Game Warden was the operational mission, and we were there to interdict that traffic in personnel, ammunition, and food logistics that was moving down into the Delta. The Army took that mission on first, actually flying off a couple of LCDs that were rigged with a makeshift flight deck. But that didn't work out too well. And this is not saying anything against the Army. But in their syllabus, they weren't trained on instruments. In Navy, we were rigorously, first in fixed wing and then in helicopters. So we were used to flying in the shit, and the Navy and the Army was not.
And that's because the Navy has to fly at sea and land on ships.
That's right, different missions.
That's it.
Different missions at the time. The Army outgrew that, but it was painful. They had a different mission than we did. So they had a unit that was assigned to our OPCON, and they would fly cover for the small boats. Now those were primarily the PBRs and the swift boats. We didn't see many swift boats up at Ben Luck. We were working with the PBR sailors. PBR, Patrol Boat River, is a 32-foot fiberglass luxury boat that was stripped clean and was highly maneuverable. But it was, I say, stripped clean of everything that was non-essential. They were very lightweight, had little armor at all, but they were very heavily armed. And these boats, you talk about guys with brass balls. They'd poke up into these impossibly narrow canals and up little riverlets just looking for trouble, and it frequently came their way. So the Army was attempting to work with them. There were all sorts of minor operational problems to overcome. Who's calling out the missions, what the support area is. It just wasn't working well. So the Navy decided that we needed a Navy squadron, and they turned to HC-1, the Fleet Angels, to put a few debts in place to help provide cover for the brown water Navy. And by brown water Navy, I mean the small boat guys, the SEALs, any Navy vessel that was down in the Mekong. And it wasn't working well with the Army. HC-1 picked it up. It started working very well because they understood the Navy's mission much better than the Army, and they were equipped with the capabilities to fly both at night and in bad weather. And I don't know if you've been in monsoon before, but it's shitty flying. It is.
I'll take your word for it.
Really bad. So as you've already mentioned, on April Fool's Day in '67, they decided that a in-country squadron was required, and that responsibility was shifted from HC-1 to HAL-3. We grew to having 9 detachments that were scattered throughout the Delta to give us a quick reaction time to virtually any area in the Mekong. And each detachment had 2 aircraft assigned. It had 2 full crews for each aircraft, and that was about it. But let me give you a little info on the noble UH-1 Bravo. I love that aircraft. It was a piece of crap. It really was, but it got us out of a lot of trouble every time we flew it.
Just for people that are listening, that's the classic Vietnam Huey aircraft. That's what you see. That's what you see in movies. That's it.
Yeah. there really was sort of a McHale's Navy cachet that was attached to the Seawolves. The Army was just getting rid of their Bravo models to go to the Charlies, which had several hundred greater horsepower, more maneuverable, blah, blah, blah. And they had some old Bravos sitting around, and rather than shipping them back to the boneyard or destroying them in place, they gave them to the Navy. So frequently we had a lot of rebuilding to do before we turned these guys loose. But God bless the Army; they gave us our aircraft. Support for the Bravo and the Navy chain was not the best. So it's easy to say beg, borrow, or steal. Borrow or steal is what we did quite well. Quite well. Our guys were incredible. A chief would grab a couple of guys and go out and come back with exactly what we needed. And you don't ask a question about that. You just put it into play. So the 9 Dets, 2 helicopters in each. Each Huey was basically configured with 2 7-shot rocket pods, 2.75 folding fin aerial rockets. We had a pair of 60s that were mounted with a flex gun. The co-pilot controlled those. But the thing that really made us unique and powerful was our door gunners. When I first got there, and just for a very short period of time, our door gunners were still firing 60s from the shoulder. And that was just an incredibly powerful tool in keeping the bad guys' heads down during our break and prepping the area for the next aircraft to roll in. So we typically have a door gunner on one side, and on the other side, if we were lucky, a 50. Eventually this grew. We got some miniguns. Most all of our Det birds eventually had miniguns, and the guys in the back would fly them, and it did wonders for keeping heads down, as did the 50 cals that we had. When we went from shoulder-held 60s to, there's a lesson there. Our guys would, it wasn't unusual to see them standing out on the skids, firing cover for us. That was a good thing, but it also resulted in brassing the sink elevator and it just wasn't really acceptable. If you brass a tail rotor, you'll know about it. It's a rough ride going back in. But they decided that, no, we can't have that. And sort of tied the gunner's hands by putting what they called a pussy pole in the door and mounted the 60 to it. Well, the guys got more than a little inventive and decided that if 160 is good, 2 would be better, and mounted 2. One, here we go again. Hayden, thanks. Yeah, but mounted 2 60s there, and found out that they were brassing the tail rotor still. So what they did was they rotated each 90 degrees in opposing directions, and all of a sudden the brassing was no longer much of a problem. Did essentially the same with our 50s. They mounted that so that it would fire 90 degrees longitudinally. And that was a very powerful weapon for not only keeping guys down, but also gave us a great degree of flexibility in the break. And perhaps I should explain that by the break, we typically would fly in a wagon wheel type approach. 2 helicopters, roughly flying 180 out from one another. So one is rolling in on the target as the other is coming around behind it. So when you then break off the target, the next helicopter is in there laying down its fire. And that 50 would really help us out in both identifying problem areas and taking care of the problem.
Yeah, that's a great background, and even when you watch Scramble the Seawolves. All the footage is just it's unbelievable footage of the way you guys were flying and what the gunners were doing. Gunners hanging out and shooting underneath the bird back in the other direction, hanging out by a gunner's belt. They might have invented the term gunner's belt. Yeah. I was. Go ahead.
There's a rite of passage that most of the FNGs got, and when I was in that FNG seat, I learned it one dark and stormy night. We're flying along, and the aircraft commander diverted my attention off to the left, and when I turned back, right here in the window of the Huey was one of my gunners who had mooning me. So, hey, this is going to be fun. That and the other was if you were new to the det as a pilot, you were going to get a collar full of brass. And it was really easy for them to do when they had the free guns. They got a little more inventive later on.
That's freaking dangerous.
It is smart.
So speaking of fun, one of the things I pulled off of the website seawolf.org is you guys had this thing that you called the Wolfgram, which was sort of like a sit rep for all the different elements that were out there, and I think it paints a pretty good picture of the overall attitude. And I pulled out one of the clips, and I'm just going to read it. So this is your Det 4, from beautiful downtown Ben Luck. The fog cutters of Det 4 would like to wish everyone a merry monsoon season. Only 10 shopping days left. We'd better start with Lieutenant J.G. White before we forget him. Everyone else has. Though he was leaving in May, but Bupers forgot to assign him a new duty station. Admin forgot to request a flight booking for him, and operations forgot to inform him that his FTL papers had been signed. But we're sure things will finally turn around for what's his name. Lieutenant Deacon Johnson left on R&R to Hawaii, and Lieutenant J.G. Rookie Rich, can't read the name, Farmer? Yeah, Farmer, was called in to straighten out Bin Tui, cutting us to 3 FTLs and ANACs. Commander Hammond will still have to fly every day, even after the Deacon gets back. Boku Map, as Lieutenant Johnson is referred to by Mama-san, won't be much good for anything after coming back from Hawaii. Rookie Rich's talent for hiding should be of great value in Bin Tui. Lieutenant J.G. Czech Carlos Steele has opened a chain of combination taco stand / minigun exchange outlets with branches in Cu Chi, Tan An, and Ben Luck, with others soon to be opening in Long Bin, Vinh Long, and Viet Thanh. Lieutenant J.G. Weird Harold Black is still looking for his mysteriously vanishing M60 bolts. Latest Det 4 basketball casualty was Lieutenant J.G. Buckets Coffee, named after his golden touch on the court, who got 4 stitches in his head after going for a rebound. Who will it be in April? 3 additions arrived this past month. Lieutenant Tom Ribola and Lieutenant J.G. Denny Rowley, which is you, sir, are new in country, and Lieutenant J.G. Bill Belts was shifted from Det 8. Oh well, with TV booze and all the attractions of the big city, what more could you want? As one of our departed pilots used to say, going home is for sissies. So, and you guys, these are all of mine. They're fantastic to read. I read that to my buddy Dave Burke, or I sent him a copy of it, and he said that's the best sit rep I've ever read in my life. So you guys had, it's good because I always talk and every vet that comes on here, we kind of talk about how we have fun, and that shows that, and I guess getting mooned through your side window also shows that you guys were having fun. I don't know if the hot brass is fun, but you guys were having a great time, and you guys were making it fun. And at the same time, man, it was very intense and very dangerous. One of the things that you kind of threw it out there. You said, hey, we put these debts all over the place so we could have a quick response time. And what that meant was you guys were spread out in these debts so that you could get to guys on the ground within a matter of minutes. Tell me about that op tempo and what it was like when they scrambled the Seawolves.
Well, we had 2 full crews for each one of our 2 birds. And what that meant was you were 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 365, 24, whatever. In order to support the Brownwater Navy, when they got in the shit, they needed us right away. And we could literally get off the deck in about 3 minutes. And that put us out there quickly enough that we could probably get them out of trouble. The worst thing that could happen to them, in my estimation, other than losing someone, is losing their engine. Because then they were just out there with, they were a grape. No place to go. So all they could do is just absorb the incoming. And with that in mind, what we would do is go on out and try and first get their heads down, and then 2, start working the target. We had a very close relationship with the PBR sailors, very close. Those guys were sticking their necks out every day, and the times they got in trouble, we were happy to go and try and extricate them, no matter what. But one of the great quotes that I saw in the history that I was reviewing is the first contact that HC-1 made. The 2 boats had gone out on patrol and had stumbled across a battalion-size element with about 80 sampans and junks that were trying to cross a river. And the boats came under, obviously, intense fire. When the Seawolves got there a couple of minutes after this, the incoming fire team lead contacts the chief of the boat and says, where do you want us to put in our strike? And he said something like, hell, I want you boys to go in there and hold field day on those guys. And that's sort of the attitude that, it is. It's an overused term, but it's a brotherhood. It truly is. We'd do anything for those guys. They were putting it all out.
Did you guys pre-brief with them for missions, or how did you figure that out? How did you figure it out? So did you know where they were going? Did you know what their target was? Did they pre-brief you?
Unfortunately, we had intelligence that was, to put it kindly, generally a piece of crap. It wasn't very good for a number of reasons. But what we'd do is we'd talk to the guys on the boats. We'd know what the tactical situation was in the OA, and we would know where they were going and what they were doing. That is, are you going out for a bunker? Are you doing an insert with SEALs? We'd get that information from the team that was there. Actually, we didn't have a team. It was just a squad. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we'd share the information, so we'd know about where they were going. And what we do as soon as we got airborne is head for the pre-brief spot, and then update the info en route, so that by the time we got there, we knew that where the fire was coming from, what the situation was with the boats, and where we were likely to put in our first strike.
So the deconfliction, as far as where you were shooting and friendly fire and all that, was, I mean, as long as they tell you, hey, north side of the river or something like that, is that how you would deconflict? And did you, when you were supporting ground troops, how the hell did you know who was who down there?
We'd have them pop smoke, and that generally worked. But the worst thing that could happen is when you say pop red, and one shows up right where you expect it, and one shows up 100 meters on down. Yeah. So the bad guys had our freaks, and well, I don't know if they had our freaks or not, but they could certainly see a smoke, right, and they'd pop it also.
Right.
Same one. And that could create a little confusion, but it also gave us a locus of points that we could talk to the guys on the boats, and they could direct our fire. And one thing that's important about that, the 2.75 folding fin aerial rocket was a great tool. I didn't like it much because it wasn't all that uncommon to have one of the fins not open properly, and then it'd just go squirrely and go anywhere. If you had the aircraft trimmed up, it could be an effective weapon. But I didn't like to use it too far out because that gave it more of an opportunity to develop a mind of its own. I use it more as a close-in weapon.
So you'd be sitting in your hooch or whatever, and you'd be just standing by. It was your 12-hour shift, and then all of a sudden the radio call would come in. They'd tell you guys go. What was the procedure like from there?
Assholes and elbows out to the aircraft. One of the other crews, first guy there, would be setting the aircraft was pre-cocked, but they'd go ahead and set the rockets up for us and jump in, hit the button, and go. I think that it's safe to say that practically every operational mission that we flew, we took off over max gross weight. You'd pull it up enough to get it out of the revetment and get it out there. And what we'd do when we were really seriously overweight is just sort of inch it ahead and get a little forward momentum on the helicopter, and then drop the collective, which puts all the weight down on the skids, and spread the skids, and then pop it up a little, and the aircraft would be would slingshot up to about 3 feet, and then hopefully you'll get across the B-40 fence at the end of the runway. It was colorful, but had to do it in order to carry enough ordnance to get guys out of trouble.
And then, when we were in Iraq, we always felt like the helicopters, which when Ramadi, the helicopters, they wouldn't really fly over the city of Ramadi because it was too dangerous for them. The couple times that they came in, it was like a just massive machine gun fire at them, and they didn't really enjoy that too much. But you guys were just so my point is that helicopters and actually vehicles as well, they're like bullet magnets, right? Everyone, if you see a helicopter come in, the enemy just sees that and focuses on it. Yep. You guys must have been, you had to be taking fire all the time.
Yeah, all the time. You get used to it. One of my gunners reminded me of the first time that we saw a 51 cal coming at us. It was night, and these things, it's as big as a basketball. It's as big as a freaking basketball coming up at you. And we started to see the tracers come up at it, and he says, "Damn, you did the right thing." I said, "Yeah." And he says, he lowered the collective immediately, got down on the deck, and then came around and we could adjust. But those things are frightening.
Oh yeah,
but it goes with the turf. Yeah. You're 20 years old. That was 23 at the time, and you think the mission. You think the pride that you take in the guys and the pride they take in you, and it's frightening. I was terrified at times. I think we all were, but you get by that. You get by that. You think about the guys down there who are really in the shit, and it's easy to apply what you know tactically and get the job done.
That's another thing that's why I was kind of asking you about meeting with the guys on the ground, because you guys are doing this, and I'm sure in some situations you had never met the people that were down there, and you're still risking your lives to go in there and give them the support that they need.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what we did.
There's a counterintuitive thing to helicopters that you just mentioned, which is when you're getting shot at from the ground, if you get lower, it takes away some of their field of fire, right?
Right.
So you would think, oh, there's someone shooting at me, I'm going to get up and go away, when the reality is, if you get lower, that person, there's going to be trees or whatever terrain features in between. That's got to take a little bit of time to get your instincts going in that direction.
Yeah. It certainly does, but it's amazing how quick those instincts are developed when you got somebody shooting at you.
And then the maintenance crews. The birds I saw pictures of birds. They were just like, it looked like they had been used for target practice.
Yeah.
Coming back, you go watch that movie, Scramble the Seawolves. It looks like target practice was used. That's what they were using the birds for, target practice. That's what some of them look like.
Yeah.
And the maintenance crews would just. They said they were making patches from beer cans.
That's true. That's true, and the guys were proud of that. And the patch that was a beer can would not be painted over generally. Yeah. No, and there's one thing that I want to say, and this is going to sound like I'm a one-trick pony in my love for the gunners, but those guys not only fired the weapons, they serviced the weapons. They serviced the helicopters. They performed all the dailies. They were all qualified plane captains. They kept that thing up and running for us so that we could walk out with our silk scarves and strap the thing on and take them out to where they needed to be in order to get the job done. No, we're not Air Force. We don't believe in silk scarves. Sorry, Air Force brethren.
And then, so you're doing this. This is a crazy operational tempo of 12 on, 12 off, 365 days.
Yeah,
that's insane.
You get used to it. It's funny.
I mean, you got 8 hours of sleep, okay, and then you got 4 hours to eat, and then the other 12 hours you're on standby to go fly into gun battles.
I got
for 365 days.
Yeah, I got nervous though when I wasn't flying. A decent aviator wants to fly. And it was hard sometimes just sitting around waiting for your turn. We played, lifted a lot of weight, played a lot of volleyball. Played volleyball with and against the SEALs and sometimes the boat drivers. It was 50 meters from the aircraft, and that kept us right there so we could respond quickly.
And then, how often were you guys doing casualty evacuation?
Only when needed. Yeah, it wasn't a primary mission of ours. If somebody got shot up and needed a lift out of town, we'd provide that. And occasionally we'd get a call that someone was wounded, and we'd go out and pick them up. But generally, that was a job that was done by some certifiable idiots that I love, the dust-off pilots. You got 19, 20-year-old kids that are out there given the keys to a Maserati. Of course, this was only a Huey, but still, you get the idea. They were crazy. They'd fly into anything. My hat really goes off to them because they'd fly into areas where they shouldn't.
That's another thing I talked about with Colonel Bill Reeder, who was on this podcast, and same thing. I mean, he just said that the pilots back then, and maybe it's because the aircraft were very inexpensive compared to to what they fly nowadays. Yeah. They don't want to risk the aircraft now. But he said these guys, they would just fly into, like, hey, your aircraft is just gonna get hit. That's the way it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
Yeah. And if you ever get the opportunity to read some of the citations for the Congressional Medal for these helo pilots, it's incredible what they did.
Now, I was, and always on this show, give the same praise that you give to the machine gunners, because the machine gunners in a ground combat, it's the machine gunners that are going to allow you to be able to maneuver and get away from a situation. Or maneuver towards, they're going to allow you to move. And same thing with your gunners and what they were doing. So you had a gunner on each side.
That's right.
That would protect the flanks.
That's right.
One of them on either a 60 or a dual 60, and the other one on a 50 cal.
Or
generally,
or eventually a minigun.
Oh, and then you guys got
Yes.
the miniguns.
Yes.
I looked at, there was a real fast flash on the screen in Scramble the Seawolves. There's a minigun, and it's upside down. You can't. I had to pause it to read it. It said, "The Lord giveth, and the minigun taketh away."
Yeah. It was a formidable weapon for close air support.
Yeah, for people that don't know what a minigun is, it fires what, 5,000 rounds a minute? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous what it shoots.
Yeah, I don't know what the rate is, but it gets your attention.
Yeah, and it's powered. It's powered. It's electrically powered, so it actually feeds the ammunition faster than a normal mechanical weapon could fire. But it's crazy how many rounds it puts. I think it's 5,000, something like that. It's a ridiculous amount. And then you guys got those. So those were on your birds while you were on deployment?
That's right. Yeah, as far as the minigun goes, it doesn't go bang, bang, bang. It goes bzzz. The rate of fire is phenomenal, and the gunners loved it. But, there's a little John Wayne in all of us, and I think every one of them would like to go back to the free guns. One thing that I do want to point out is that we were not very well equipped. So when we were up and around, on patrol or actually out there engaged and had to fly in to gas up and rearm, we'd go into an Army base because the Army had all the fuel and they had nails. The 2.75 makes a boom, but if you can load it with flechettes, you can really keep the enemy down. So we'd go on up there, depending on the tactical situation. If we had a cause, their anti-personnel, something developing on the ground, we'd load up there. And that's where I saw my first Cobra. The Snake was an impressive aircraft. It had so much more firepower than any one of our Hueys. But where do you put the gunners? It's 4.5 seating. They don't have any suppression for rolling off target other than your wingman. Mm-hmm. And it was intriguing, but it just didn't make sense to me.
Did I remember this correctly, that at one point whoever the commander was at the time got offered, hey, do you guys want some Cobras? And the answer was, nope, we need to stick with the Hueys.
I'd heard that story. I don't know whether it's true or not, but yeah, we like that. But, one of the guys you mentioned in the Wolfgram, and I will mention his name, Chuck Steely. Upchuck was quite a guy. And he would go out to requisition parts for us. At the time, the Army had a contractor, Dynalectron, that was doing the work on their aircraft. And, they're bored out of their skull when they don't have anything to work on. So they got a Loach and started rebuilding it from spare parts from here and there and got it to be fully functional. And, to have an observation helicopter like that, to go out and snoop and poop with us, that would be incredible. Chuck engineered a deal where for a refrigerator full of beer, they'd give us this aircraft. It was written off the rolls. They're closing it. But, they said, hey, if you have a problem, let us know. We'll come down and take care of it. I like to think that Chuck was unplugging our refrigerator when the Dead O&C came in, and not just no, but hell no. But that sort of thing was not unusual over there. Yeah, God bless Chuck. He did everybody a lot of great service.
Speaking of beer, apparently the wolf on the Seawolf insignia is somehow based on the Lowenbrow beer can.
That's what they say.
Allegedly.
That's what they say. I can neither confirm nor deny. Strangely enough, I didn't drink much beer at all when I was over there because they seemed to treat it with something that just put the taste off. Mm-hmm. We all thought it was formaldehyde. That was the going rumor, but
they told us that when I was in Guam, my first deployment. They told us the same thing.
Yeah.
that there was formaldehyde. That rumor survived from 1969 to 1992 when I was on my first deployment. There was formaldehyde in the beer.
But how did the beer taste?
Awful. And I kept trying to see if I could make it taste better, but I didn't succeed. So some of the stuff that you're talking about, you know, from a leadership perspective, you got guys that are risking their lives every time that call comes. How did you see guys that got to a point where they couldn't take it anymore? Did you have situations where you had to send guys back to the rear? What did you do when you saw a guy kind of start to get too nervous to go?
This may sound self-serving, but I don't care. I didn't see anyone in our deaths, and I did not see directly anyone who behaved in a cowardly manner, an overcautious manner. We didn't have anyone that was sent back to the rear. There was a camaraderie that you just can't explain to somebody who hasn't enjoyed it. It's an honor to serve with people like that, and we all took pride in our reputations among our squadron mates. So it wasn't hard at all.
And that was so clear. When you watch Scramble the Seawolves, it's so clear. And there's this incredible, like you can see the camaraderie, and you can hear it when you read through the Wolfgrams. You can see that guys are having a good time, and there's this, I mean, what I would consider, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but like a peer pressure of, hey, we're gonna do this. You know, I've often said that when you get to a good SEAL platoon, it's not a team, it's not a platoon, it's like a gang that you have. It's a gang. And we just don't allow for that bad attitude to creep out.
Yeah. I feel the same way about the Seawolves. And this might be a good time to share with you the fact that I, at one time, after returning from Vietnam, was so fed up with the mission that we were flying. It was an aging aircraft. It didn't have systems that were required to do the job. The job itself was not that important. And, you know, you come from living on adrenaline for a year and then come back and you're expected to, I don't know, figuratively put your boots up on the table. One day I got so pissed off. In the middle of the morning, I jumped in my Corvette. Remember that? Hey, I learn. Jumped in my Corvette and tore on up to Coronado. And two of the SEALs that we operated with, friends, were there. And I walked into the office. They had their LSDs pulled up face to face. And I said, guys, I've had it. I want to join up. And they looked at each other and they locked up their secret. And each of them grabbed me by an elbow and took me up to the little club in Coronado. And we started pounding beers that tasted great, no formaldehyde there. And by the middle of the afternoon, they'd convinced me that being a peacetime SEAL wasn't everything that I would expect, and that the Navy had put an awful lot of investment into making me what I was, and I could make a far better contribution by continuing to fly. And I turned my back on my opportunity to find out whether I had what it takes to become a SEAL.
I'm surprised that those guys, I'm surprised they didn't talk you into it. Those guys must have, I'm surprised once they got enough beer in them, they didn't have you down at Bud's with a log standing over your head.
Yeah.
Is there any particular missions when you were in Vietnam that stand out as, you know, one of the ones on Scramble the Seawolves that they talked about? This was absolutely ridiculous. They're talking about the helicopters were there supporting a unit on the ground. There was no one to relieve them. They needed more fuel. They were running out of fuel. The fuel light's on. There's still no one to relieve the helicopters and provide support. They say, you know what? Screw it. We're just going to stay until we run out of gas. And that's what they did. They stayed until they ran out of gas. The other group came in. They used ammo cans to refuel, to carry. Once the fire on the ground had subsided, they used ammo cans to refuel the helicopters that were out of fuel so they could get back to base. Yep. That's freaking crazy.
Well, we never really took time to think about whether it was crazy or not. You got a job to do. And, that's probably a natural way to explain it. That was the job. You went out and did that because that's what was expected. That's what the guys in the boats expected of you. Mm-hmm. That's what the SEAL team that we had, the SEALs that we had operated out of Benelux expected. And when they call you, you go.
That's another thing I think is really impressive about the Seawolves is, well, first of all, they took volunteers to go do the job. And like you said, a bunch of people volunteered. But the other thing is, and I heard some of the vets talking about this, some of the Seawolf vets talking about the fact that they'd say, oh, I was in the Navy and I was, in the shit. In Vietnam, people say, oh, you were in the Navy, you weren't in the shit. But the reality is I can't imagine that there was any of the gunners that when they joined the Navy, they thought to themselves, what I'm going to be is a door gunner in direct combat with the enemy. These are guys that joined the Navy for whatever reason, and they end up in that job where they're doing this day in, day out, and risking their life day in, day out. Not really what they signed up for, and yet they held the line over and over and over again.
All of them volunteers. Yeah. It humbles me to have been able to operate with guys like that. And the pilots brass balls. It was expected. It was the job. The gunners had those balls and then some, because they kept us up, kept the aircraft up, kept the systems up. I had a leadership lesson when I first got there. Growing up, my dad, we'd hunt and fish, and I had fired we had two 14s for each bird. They hung on the back of the pilot seat. And I'd taken one on out. We had a little makeshift range and fired it and brought it back on in after I was done and took it in to the crew area to clean it. You would have thought that I had just stepped on a baby rabbit. I mean, it was more like, it was polite, it was respectful, but give me that thing. And the guys had that feeling about the armament. This is my job. I do this. So, it took a little getting used to. It was easier to let them clean my 45.
Then I just kind of want to, when you're there, you start to get to know these guys really well. And you didn't have anyone killed from your debt while you were there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But obviously other guys in other debts were killed while you were there. Did you guys have any kind of, and this is something I've talked about before, is Americans, and I think it's just because we have so many different cultures here, we don't have a good protocol to deal with death. And other cultures around the world, if someone dies, you do this for a day, you do this for a day, you say this prayer, you go through this ceremony, and then you move on. And Americans, we have so many different cultures here that are all mixed together, and death isn't something that happens all the time, so we really don't know a lot of times, hey, what am I supposed to do? And I think that's what causes people problems, is they don't know how to handle it, they don't know how to put closure on it, and so it just kind of sticks around. When you guys would learn that someone in your debt had been killed, was there any protocol that you guys set up? Was there anything that you guys did to try and take that on board and then move past it?
I probably miss out on a leadership opportunity. And when guys got killed in other debts in combat, or even just ferrying an aircraft in for maintenance, I didn't sit down with the guys and talk about it. I internalized it, and being Irish, would reflect on all the good times we had. Didn't think about what went wrong. Didn't want to know initially. Eventually you do, because it's important for your trade. But I just think about the good times that we shared together. I lost a couple of academy classmates. I lost some great friends that I made while I was in country. One young fellow, and I don't want to mention any names, but he and I were both bicyclists. And the one thing that he wanted to do when he got back home was build himself the primo bike and start competing. And he never got that opportunity. And when you personalize something like that, when you think about the opportunities that are lost in a heartbeat, it makes you very thankful to be alive. It makes you very thankful to have known that person. And it makes you feel like you should redouble your efforts to get the sons of bitches that took that life away from him. It can help focus your aggression, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that was, I guess, my way. Again, I was uneducated. No one ever taught me. But one thing I did is, okay, we're going to go to work. Yeah. That's the thing that I knew how to do. That's what I still know how to do, is like go to work. And, there's, I guess you could say there's some, eventually you gotta deal with it. You gotta feel it more in the future. But man, when I was overseas, it's like, yeah, okay, we're going to work. Yeah. And that's where the focus becomes, because, and also from my perspective, it was like, your guys, that's what they would want you to do. That's what they would want you to do. So
let me share something with you based upon what your guys would want you to do. Came home from a mission one night. We were in contact, and you're decompressing. And I walk up to my rack, and there's this manila envelope for Lieutenant J.G. Rowley's eyes only. And I feel, oh no, somebody back home has died. And I open this thing up with trembling hands and pull it out, and it's a standard Navy message. And I said, "Hi, honey, I'm going to be in Tansanute in 3 days' time. Come on up and see me." Sean's mom, the love of my life, call sign Stinky. Doesn't have anything to do with personal problems. It's a matter of attitude. Yeah. But she was a flight attendant for Braniff, and she was flying Freedom Birds in and out. And she had one coming in. Ben Luck's only about 40 clicks south of Saigon. And okay, and word immediately spread like wildfire throughout the det. And my guys, God bless them, they slept in a sandbagged bunker, or enlisted crew. And it was normally pretty ripe. But it was also the only place that was really, that had a little bit of privacy. Well, they had determined that I was going to bring Stinky on down for lunch, pick her up in Tansanute and bring her on down. So they had that place spit-shined. I don't know how they did it, but it was all right. It turned out to be a bit of a disappointment. We flew a helicopter on up to Tansanute. And, we're going over bad guy country, so it was armed. And I landed the thing in front of, I didn't land it. I wasn't flying it. But we land in front of the terminal there at Tansanute, and immediately this Air Force truck comes on out with its cherry top going, and this sergeant says, "You can't land here." And I pointed out to him that we already had, and that we were just waiting for the arrival. And we solved the problem by saying, "Listen, this aircraft is armed. Why don't you stay here and watch it for us, and we'll just be a little while." So we walked on over, and this big old green Braniff jet comes on in, and everybody gets off. And, the incoming guys aren't nearly as gay and festive as the outgoing guys. So they get off, and there's Gail standing up at the top of the ladder just waving at me. So Turns out she can't get off the aircraft, but they didn't say anything about us getting on. So, my crew goes on up the ladder, and we're in there, and Gail's introducing them to the other stewardesses, and they're loving it. And we go to the back of the aircraft and sat there for 45 minutes just talking with each other. But when we got back and Gail wasn't there, the guys were just crestfallen. They were so excited about having somebody there. And, they I don't think the place was ever cleaned again. Yeah. But that was my experience of dating my hometown honey in the zone. Yeah.
Then, what was it like? Was it standard Vietnam where just replacements would come when it was time for a guy to rotate out? A new guy would show up?
Pretty much. Like I mentioned earlier, I was sort of cut adrift at the Annapolis Hotel and happened to run into a guy, Weird Harold, who you referenced in that Wolfgram. He came just walking through with the Det 4 ONC, Colonel Hammond. We called him a colonel. He was a Navy commander. And Dave introduced us and said, hey, this is a great guy. We should have him. And as it turns out, they had an opening. And within a matter of a few days, I was in Det 4. So it was sort of a roll-your-own environment. Yeah. Obviously, they put guys into slots where they needed them. But it was fluid.
So then your time's coming up to head home. Was it a 1 year, 365 days?
Yeah, pretty much, yes.
And then did you just stayed right on doing your 12 on, 12 off until it was time to go?
What they normally do is for the last week or two that you were in country, send you into Ben Tui for the out processing, and we'd fly with the Sea Lords. So, you didn't stop flying. It was just a different mission.
And then you get back. Then you get okay. Your time's up, and it's time to go home.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, there'd be a bit of a party, a drunk ex, but other than that, yeah, that was it.
Then how was that transition going from Vietnam, and then what? How many hours later you're back in America, or how many days?
It was a straight through shot. We stopped off in Honolulu. There was one other stop, maybe Guam, and then Honolulu, and then home. It straight through, and
so wait. So you were you married? You weren't married yet.
No. We got engaged on R&R in Hong Kong, and that's a two-beer story.
So you got R&R from Vietnam, met your bride to be in Hong Kong.
That's right,
and proposed.
Yeah, we'd already talked about it. We knew it was coming. Got down on a knee in Jimmy's kitchen, and all of a sudden but it was pretty interesting. When I arrived in Hong Kong, I'd booked a room at the Hilton. So I go on down there, and I'm checking in, and I'm in my my uniform. So the manager happens to be walking behind the desk and says, Mr. Rowley, Mrs. Rowley is waiting for you in your room. I figured, shit, Gail's getting here tomorrow. What's Mom going to think? Well, of course, Gail had gotten in a day early. She was in there. But, times were different back then.
So your transition from Vietnam back to America, all of a sudden, and you were, people use the term Wild West sometimes to describe various military situations where it was like the Wild West. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it gets much more Wild West than being a Seawolf in Vietnam. I mean, it just doesn't seem the way you guys were running things, the way the support that you got or didn't get. Yeah. Just the fact like you guys didn't even have flight suits. They wouldn't issue them or something like that, and you guys were just wearing kind of what you could get a hold of. Everything was sort of Wild West.
It took longer to get into a flight suit than it did to pull on Nomex shirt and pants, and frequently it wasn't Nomex. And as they say, I've flown missions in my Tenny runners. Just we'd leave our gear there in the seat. And if I was playing volleyball and they scrambled us, you don't think about anything but getting in that aircraft and getting it cranking. So yeah, it was Wild West. Thank God.
Yeah, and then you get back to America, and you're still in the Navy, right?
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, got through training. You know, first of all, you're just decompressing. I was newly married. Gail and I are getting used to living together. She's dealing with my unique personality, and it was sort of a scramble. We partied our tits off when we got back. A couple of SEALs. One of them had was connected to a family that owned one of the mansions there in Coronado on the waterfront. I think that was Front Street. At any rate, just a man. It was a beat up old place, but it was truly a mansion. And they had a couple mattresses on the floor, and they had a table in the kitchen, but no furniture, and they had a tapper. And we'd go over there and just party like crazy. And where I'm going with this story is through all of that time and through all of the craziness and through all of the drinking, there was only one person who got hurt as a result of overindulging. He ran his car into a telephone pole. Didn't kill him. Didn't even hurt him very much. But that was the only instance that I know of. And the only casualty we had to alcohol was that same guy who turned himself in for AA and was cashiered out of the Navy. And then for 10 years he was sober, clean and sober, and he applied to get back in, and the Navy, God love it, let him back in. But more remarkable than that, this is one of our pilots now from the Seawolves. They gave him his wings back, and he finished up his career flying.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, the point is we had a really great time when we got back, and all that was sort of a haze. But when I checked into the squadron after I completed the RAG, learned to fly the Noble H-3C Slug, yeah, our commanding officer took me in, and in my checkerboard interview says, "I know where you've been. I know what you've done. You aren't going to get away with any of that crap here." And that there was a leadership lesson there. I knew that I never wanted to be like him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that had to be intimidating for a guy, though, that's taken on these pilots that have been doing what you had been doing, and all of a sudden they got to try and rein these guys back into the world.
Yeah, I hope I'm not going into too many sea stories, but great friend of mine. The only names I'm using are guys who are deceased. But Chooch Canis was a co-pilot, and we were sent off to Guam for some specialized training. And he and I are there in our poopy suits at the bar, the O Club bar at the Air Force Base on Guam. And we're enjoying a couple of beers, which tasted good. And all of a sudden, this bell rings like crazy. And in come these guys in pressed flight suits with ascots. And everybody in the bar, all the Air Force guys, are standing at attention. This B-52 crew coming back from a mission. And we're just sitting there with our elbows on the bar. And the crowd didn't know what to make of us. But they didn't get too close to us either. Come on, guys. We all have a mission to do, and Rolling Thunder was very important. If taken to its conclusion, we might not have lost that war. And I use the words loss and war carefully there. That's not a slip of the tongue. They've got a mission to do, but I mean, yeah. The war from 40,000 feet, and they're worried about SAMs because they turn in at this. I don't want to go there. I'm sorry. I'd like to apologize to the United States Air Force and all the noble men and women who fly for the Air Force.
Yeah, that's actually, those when we got back from Ramadi, we got after it in a very similar way for several months. And I don't know how long you did, but yeah, there was a lot of beer and other things that were drank, and I don't know, it seemed like the normal thing to do. I don't know. It seemed like we were going to kind of get it out of our systems for a little while and, get over it. Because it is, it's not that big of a deal. I don't want to make it sound like it's all crazy, but you're over there and it's like, okay, it's a little bit of, it's a different scenario, and you got to kind of process through the fact that everything that you just were doing, whatever, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, is now completely different. Your life is completely different, and there's no one shooting at you, and there's no one, you're not going to lose in your guys, which was the weight that I felt lifted off of me about a month after I got home. I woke up one morning and I just kind of felt different, and I was like, why do I felt different in a good way? And what I felt was, I was thinking about, why do I feel different right now? And as I sat there and thought about it, I was like, I'm not worried about any of my guys getting killed right now, which was the first time in months that I hadn't been thinking about that all day, every day. And so, when you come home, there's definitely that. And I think you got to pay attention as a leader to everyone in that group to make sure that guys are staying within the box and staying within what's I guess possibly normal for those situations, because there will definitely be individuals that they'll go too far, and they're not making the transition, and what they need is some help, someone to come pull alongside and say, hey man, let's take it back a little bit, let's readjust, and life's going to be normal again and all that. Unfortunately,
the way we were rolled in and out of the squadron when we left and came back to the world, it was pretty much an individual effort. So that, and I also temper it with the fact that your war was entirely different than ours, I would imagine. Yours was more up close and personal than ours. To tell you the truth, I don't recall ever reflecting on whether my guys were going to come back from this mission or not. It's something that we just all did. We all did it together. And I don't mean that to sound callous. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't part of my thinking. And that goes back to what Cousin Kim asked, how did you do it?
Yeah.
Trying to bring everybody back whole.
Yeah, I definitely, without question, thought about that every day. That was the biggest thing that I thought about every day, was because there was guys getting killed every day, basically. There was memorial services every day. There was, one of the things, and I've talked about this a bunch, but there was a vehicle graveyard outside. It was on the way to the gate to leave Camp Ramadi. There was a vehicle graveyard where all the vehicles that had been blown up and destroyed by IEDs, and there was, I would say, 50 or 75, maybe even 100, but a massive area. And so in order to leave the gate, you drove by that. Yeah. It was a pretty harsh reminder. And my guys would go out on missions. I wasn't always going on missions because I was overall in charge, and there was multiple units, and so a lot of times I'd be just saluting the guys as they'd be leaving. Yeah. And that's a worse feeling of like, okay, you just got your damn fingers crossed, and you hope you've done everything you can, and hope you've mitigated the risk. But that was the heaviest weight for me, was just that daily thought. Because then there was the fact that there was always guys in the field, almost always. There was almost always one of my, little detachments of guys was out there with 7 guys and 20 Iraqi soldiers, and there was gunfights going on, and that's the way it was. That was the heaviest thing from a leadership perspective for me. And so when I got home, it took about a month, before I was like, and the other thing is, everything that I'm saying about that feeling, I was barely conscious of it while I was there. I was like, it was there, but I was more focused on doing the job. Yes. I was more focused on, it kind of cooked me like, when they say they put the frog in the boiling water, you cook it slow, whatever it was like that. It was more like that. Like over time, it just built up, and what I did was just focused on working hard. But then when I got home, it was like I said, it was like a month after I got home, I woke up one day and just felt like a weight lifted, and I was saying, what is that? What is that? And then as I thought about it, I'm thinking, why do I feel like this? I just had a big smile on my face and was, walking around my house and thinking to myself, this feels good. What is this? And then I realized, you're actually not worried that one of your friends is going to die today, which was a totally, so like I said, it was something that crept up on me and was just there. It was just part of being over there, and it felt good to have that weight come off. But again, I think I dealt with it pretty decently. And did I get drunk with my friends? Yeah. Well, there was some significant TU Bruiser activities that were fun, and we let off a lot of steam.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. But again, what worries me about saying that is that there's some people that take that as like, oh, okay, now I'm cleared hot just to go and get drunk and get crazy. And it's like, no, actually you're not. You got to keep that in check. And especially from the guys that are in leadership positions, hey man, you got to keep a close eye and step back and detach and look at the guys and say, okay, I get it. We're going to let off some steam. I get it. We're going to adjust back to the real world, but we need to make sure that everyone is staying inside the box and make sure that they're going to come back out of this thing okay. Because, I mean, we all know it nowadays, man. The veterans come home, and that's a hard transition to make from combat to, the civilian world and even the world that you're talking about, going from being a Seawolf in the Wild West, coming back to your commanding officer saying, look, you're not going to get away with that crap here. And, we definitely had our share of little stories like that from TU Bruiser where, guys would not quite be ready. As a matter of fact, JP Donnell, who is with me at Echelon Front, my brother, when we came home, he was in another platoon, got hurt. They sent him to our basic training school. So BUDS, he was going to be a BUDS instructor. And he didn't last very long over there because you can't take a guy that's 23 years old that just been through what JP had been through and say, okay, now you're going to go and be in charge of training these guys that are trying to make it through BUDS. It wasn't a good fit.
Yeah.
And so I just, luckily had friends and was able to just pull him over, and he worked directly for me again, getting guys ready for the more advanced training and combat training, which he was perfect for. Yeah. But that was an example of where, I had to look out and say, okay, this is not a good job for him right now. JP's already an intense guy, and coming home from Ramadi, it was a tough deployment. He lost friends, and as a young kid, he wasn't ready to be teaching these young. He's looking at these kids like, are you kidding me? I'm gonna freaking decimate you guys. And so I had to pull him over to a little bit more advanced training. My brother JP. So you get so now you're staying in the Navy. That's it.
Never a doubt in my mind.
And you end up, you end up doing the anti-submarine warfare, which is the job that kind of is that the job that annoyed you?
We called it so what. We were given a mission without the means to prosecute the mission, and that annoyed me.
And then you went on to become a test pilot. Is that right? Is that correct?
The steely-eyed, granite-jawed test pilot, and look at me now. Yeah.
So what is that job like?
It's fascinating. I'm living proof that nothing harms a person more than too much formal education. But I get off on that. And it was brought home to me once when we were having a raging party at our home in Patuxent River, Maryland, when I was there at the test center. And most of the guys would have a copy of Playboy magazine on their night table. Well, a couple of guys had gone back to take a leak in our bedroom and found that I had some technical reports there. And on mine, and I didn't hear the end of that for a long time, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the technical aspects of it. I've often said there are only two topics that are worthy of conversation between men, and that is flying and fornication. And I lived to fly. Having said that, since I retired, I've flown very little. But at that point in my life, it was all about flying. And it was a wonderful experience. The flying we did was not experimental flying. It was engineering flying. We'd test out weapons systems. We'd test out new aircraft. I was fortunate to to lead one of the three prongs of the biggest helicopter acquisition that the Navy's made when they were looking for the new Lamps helicopter. Two of my great good friends were flying the Sikorsky and the Boeing products, and they were pretty well through their test program, which took, I think, about a year, when Bell Helicopter piped up and says, "Hey, we've got one too." Well, they didn't have a really logical contender, but they needed somebody to go on down and lead the test of that aircraft, and that was me. And boy, that was fun. You know, you literally are flying a test card that takes you out to the edge of the envelope, and hey, are you good enough? Sure, I'm good enough. Yeah, just don't go too far and don't bust your ass. There's a lot of investment that you're sitting in right there that they want you to keep in one piece. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Lifelong friends there, and just keep me to a story. The two guys that were flying the Boeings and Sikorsky, dear friends. One of them was a Naval Academy classmate, and he and I flew in Vietnam. And the other guy, Greek, is just a wonderful guy and still a lifelong close friend. Well, Duck was fortunately for Hughes, became their chief test pilot. He got out of the Navy and was flying for Hughes, and was killed in a horrible accident. And Greek and I sort of closed ranks, and decided that we were going to try and send Duck off in good stead. So, if you're familiar with San Diego now, you know about the Point Loma Lighthouse and the area up there. That's where the family was waiting. Mm-hmm. Hughes had given us a 500 to scatter the remains in. Greek took it upon himself to do this. Now, at this time, he probably had 2,500 flight hours. He knew his way around a helicopter. He's in his Navy blues. He gets in the aircraft. He's got the cremains in his lap, and they're flying out along well below the point on out over the ocean. And he looks up and sees the family up there, and he's so emotionally wrought that he reaches down and takes the lid off of the cremains. Well, if you've ever been in a helicopter, you know that it's not a very stable place to have cremains, and immediately he said it was IFR inside that cockpit with Duck everywhere. And fortunately, the family didn't know what was going on, and everything came out fine. But Greek had called me up and said, "Hey, I had to make mustard today." And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Yeah, and when I got my blues out, I'm still brushing Duck off of them." So, yeah, there's ways you accommodate that. I always think of the great good times that Duck and Greek and I had together, and I miss him. Sure, I miss him all the time. But life goes on.
Sounds like he had the final say in that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were OIC during the Iranian hostage crisis. What was that like?
That was self-made. You know, yes, we were the only helicopter out there that wasn't on the large gray boats to actually fly the mission that could provide combat search and rescue. So we took full advantage of that, got the armament that we thought passing through Guam. I didn't like the sidearm I had, so I went on down to buy one and know it's going to take 2 weeks. And it took me about 2 hours to get in touch with the local authorities, and I had my sidearm on, just going over the horizon, which is sort of silly, you know, I mean, really. You're flying an overwater mission, and you need to say, well, you never can tell. It's always good to be prepared. But at any rate, we'd go out there and just train for that. When we weren't actually out there in support of the boats, we'd go out and train for that.
You end up doing your 20 years, and then you called it at 20. Is that how long you did? 20?
21.
21 years. Yeah. And then you went off to the civilian sector.
Yes, I did.
Started working a bunch of various jobs.
That's right. I started out in high tech. our company had a professional staff of 200, 60% of whom were PhDs. And I had enough technical background that I'd go out to a customer with one or more of these PhDs, and they'd make their presentation, and I'd say,
let me say
thank
what
you.
he just
What
said.
the doctor meant to say was, I just had a great time. Being surrounded by smart people, it just is a lot of fun. It can be very frustrating at times, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah. And
we have a curious insult in the teams, which is someone will ask you about a guy, and the guy's not a bad guy, but someone will say, oh, he's a really smart guy. Which is, he might not be the best, most common sense. He might not be the best leader, but he's a smart guy. So yes, it can get frustrating hanging around with people that are super smart. And then when did you move to Hawaii?
About 14 years ago. I spent 5 years in range operations, and then they created a new position. And for my last 5 working years, I was the environmental manager for the Pacific Missile Range. My daughter, when she learned of that, said, Dad, you hate those guys. And I said, yes, Heather, but now I'm in a position to say no. And I just had a lot of fun. The local environment community, great people, but they were not strong supporters of military training. Mm-hmm. And that was my cause, to help them explain why we needed to train out there, and that we weren't out to kill the whales. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And then how long ago was it that you retired?
About 4 years ago. Yeah, that's... Retirement has been very, very good to DJ. Yeah.
And I mean, I got one more quote that I wanted to read, because I know we've been going at it for a bit here, but this is another quote. This is a quote from a Vietnam SEAL. And here we go. Not only does many a SEAL owe his life to the Seawolves, but the units often operated together as a team. Very often located at the same base of operations, we developed friendships that are still alive today. Operating well outside standard operating procedures, the Seawolves have lifted SEALs out of enemy encirclements, and I have known them to land in a hot LZ to lift out caches too large for the SEALs to pack out. They also evacuated our wounded when medevac helicopters were not available. Most important, they were always there for us. When we were down in the mud and darkness, the night illuminated with red and green tracers, the VC behind every shadow. Many times, after we were out of danger, they stayed with us until we were safely extracted in the middle of the river and out of the range of enemy fire. And that's Chief Barry Enoch, who's a legendary SEAL from SEAL Team 1, Navy Cross recipient. And I think that quote just really exemplifies the bond between SEALs and Seawolves. And like I said, it was something that I heard about as a young SEAL, and it's a bond that still exists when I talk to the Vietnam SEALs, and it's a bond that's always going to be there. And
I'm into that.
Do you have any? Like I said, we've been at it for a while, and like I told you before we started, I could sit here and listen to you all day. But do you have any other closing thoughts that you wanna mention?
Hand salute to the 44 that didn't make it back with us. Anyone who hasn't been to the wall, anybody who's served who hasn't been to the wall, you got to make that trip. A shout out again, and I know it sounds like a broken record, but to the guys that are responsible for getting me back in one piece, our gunners. Great human beings. And to the guys I flew with, hey, next time we get together, the beer's on you. Yeah, I should share with you that as a technical person, I have developed what I call Rowley's theorem. And Rowley's theorem says that all the truly great ladies hook up with all the truly big buffoons. And Stinky, if you're out there listening, I sure am glad that you did that. Love you more than pork chops, baby.
And well, also thanks to your son Sean for connecting us. And when he came up and asked me, he's like, "Oh, would you have a Seawolf on your podcast?" I'm like, let me think about that for 0.2 seconds. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, thanks to Sean for connecting us, and it's been an honor to sit here and listen to you. And thanks for what you and all the Seawolves did for our country, for our Navy, and specifically, thank you for the support that you and your brothers gave to my brothers and my forefathers on the ground in Vietnam. We'll never forget what you and your brothers did. And we'll never forget the sacrifices of those brave Seawolves that made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom.
Amen.
And Dennis Rowley has left the building. And obviously awesome to have him on, and incredible opportunity to talk about the Seawolves. And go check out this website. It's seawolf.org. Really cool website to read through. One of the coolest things on it is I read that example of the Wolfgram. They got all the Wolfgrams, and they're all just funny. Yeah. They're good. They're worth checking out. They've also got all the awards they've got the list of the awards, but they got the Navy Cross Awards in there. Just an awesome website. So go check it out, seawolf.org. And with that, if you want to support, yourself, this podcast, etc., Echo, what do you got?
Stay on the path. Okay, stay on the path. Talk about jiu-jitsu. Yes, jiu-jitsu. Get a gi. We know we're getting gis. Origin gis. Do we all know that yet? That's origin. Do we know that?
Yes, you should know that.
So go to originmain.com. That's where you get your gi and rash guards for jiu-jitsu. 100%, bar none. I'm almost tempted to say don't even get any other kind of gi or rash guard.
I would agree with that. Yep. Yeah.
Boom.
100%.
Also, if you're warming up or cooling down or just cruising, they have joggers. And you got into the joggers.
Yeah, no, so my son got some of the joggers, which he's totally stoked on. I tried them on just to see. It was so horrible. They are so not my situation.
Well, here's the thing with joggers, depending on how you wear them, for sure. But they're more of a, how should I put this kind of acceptably? They're kind of form-fitting from time to time, right? So they're kind of, so they don't flap around. So they're form-fitting. You in form-fitting joggers, I could see how that could be a violation for sure. But if you're not Jocko, joggers, most comfortable joggers in the world, probably in the history of joggers, maybe ever, Origin joggers.
Also, we got some supplements on there that you can take. You got Joint Warfare, which will keep your joints intact.
Yeah.
Krill oil, same thing, kind of universal substance.
Yeah, that's to maintain the joint. I went off the Joint Warfare for a little while.
Why?
Long story.
Long story being.
Yeah, lapse of discipline. How the kind where I'm like, I don't feel the pain, or nothing. So I just don't. I'm not like compelled as much.
Oh.
When you.
Okay,
You make it like a routine though, right?
Yes, it's part of
that's
the
just the thing.
I get up every day.
Yeah.
I take it before I take krill oil and Joint Warfare when I wake up in the morning and before I go to bed at night. Period. End of story every day.
Yeah, you didn't even train that day still.
100%.
Joint Warfare.
I did train that day, but
yeah. Well, so
discipline is not 100% because I don't take that every day. I take it when needed.
Yeah,
but I will say I've been using. I feel like that's a little bit of a crutch right now because I've been using it a lot before jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Well, still, you can take it every day.
Yeah, you can.
But no, the Joint Warfare. I like your mindset. I think I should incorporate that where it's just every day. Yeah. So with the Joint Warfare, I'll be like, well, it'll be in my mind, not even necessarily heavily, but it'll be in my mind. Oh, did I train hard enough to warrant like Joint Warfare kind of attitude? It's more or less like that. So I wasn't feeling any kind of inflammation or pain or nothing. So I was like, So I skipped it one day, and then I sort of, it just wasn't in my mind. Sure enough, and I'm still lifting, still doing it, still in the game. Freaking elbow comes back because I'd get elbow from from pressing, and I'd get little elbow things. Nothing terrible. You just got to warm up more or whatever. But man, it came back.
And then did you go back
just
on
like on
the joint warfare?
100%. This was just the other day. So usually it takes a few days to like kind of get back.
How's it feel right now?
It's fine. But when I start, if I start to do a push up, like a close grip push up right now, I'll feel it probably.
Check.
Maybe I won't. I don't know because it's been a few days.
So that's joint warfare, krill oil, discipline. And then you got Molk, which is just the food that you need in your body. Yeah. That's what it basically is.
Yeah.
And it tastes good. And also for your kids, you got Warrior Kid Molk, strawberry and chocolate. They're both really good, but let's face it, the strawberry is a whole nother deal. Brian is working on adult strawberry Molk. We'll be coming out with that.
Can I ask you this about the regular Molk? Dark chocolate is good, right?
Yeah.
Like after a certain percentage of what is it? What makes dark chocolate better, right? It's like a certain percentage of
you're talking
dark
about in
chocolate.
general in life.
Yeah, in life.
Yeah. Because there's no sugar in it. If you just get straight dark chocolate,
right? But then
that's
there's
like 80%.
80%. That's like the threshold.
Let me put you this way: 80% is good. When you get to 72%, you're like, oh, that's just a tasty.
Yeah.
You're just eating dessert.
Yeah.
80%'s not quite. It still gives you a chocolate satisfaction, but it's not like the same.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way: if you eat 2 squares of 80% chocolate, you won't desire more. If you eat 2 squares of 72% chocolate, you're like, I'm going to have a little bit more.
Yeah,
because
okay.
it's just like that tasty.
Okay, perfect. So the Molk with adult Molk. My question to you, in your opinion, your Jocko disciplined opinion, if I put a chunk. Because last night I put this chunk. There was this chunk. I don't know why it was there. It was there. A chunk of chocolate. It wasn't 80%.
In the blender?
I didn't put the whole thing. I broke off a little piece. So it was maybe like the size of two, those little baby Snickers bars? 2 of those, I would say. That's how big the chunk, this block of chocolate.
2 of the baby Snickers?
Yeah, it was pretty big.
Yeah, that's.
It was a big milkshake though. It's like 3 scoops.
Okay.
The 30-ounce. The mugs that we have, full. Anyway, put it in with the peanut butter chocolate milk, and it enhanced it.
Oh yeah, well of course you put some sugar in there.
So the question is like how much of a violate? Like if it's 80% chocolate or dark, 80% dark chocolate.
But you didn't put 80% dark.
I know,
in there. You
but
just sugar chocolate.
Doesn't matter what I did or didn't do. I'm saying theoretically. If I did 80% or more chocolate, that's good. That's still within the confines of being on the path. In the game, right?
I'd say you're in the game and on the path at 80%.
So when we come across 80% chocolate, let's add that, just collectively. Let's add that and see how we all feel about that. That's what I think.
Check.
You get the little chips at the bottom of the cup, too. It's pretty cool.
Check. Also, I just talked to a guy, strawberry, or for the Warrior Kid, Molk. If your kid is lactose intolerant, you put them on the almond milk.
Right.
So get some of that.
Also, if you want to represent on the path, Jocko is a store. It's called Jocko Store. It's where you can get shirts, hats, hoodies, tank tops, more rash guards recommended still within the confines of being in the game. Or rash guards as well. If you want to represent in the wild, on the path, and in the wild at the same time. JockoStore.com. That's where you can get some cool stuff. All Jocko approved. All of it. Women's stuff on there.
By the way, there is counterfeit Jocko stuff.
Yeah, but here's the thing about the counterfeit. Here's the thing about the counterfeit ones. They're like obvious. Like if all you have to do here, I dig it. Like you'll see a cool design that seems new because that's really the what do you call it? The visceral, not visceral. That's negative, right? Your immediate response is like, oh, new design on Amazon or wherever these counterfeits exist. You see the new design, so you kind of, oh, cool, and you in your haste, you click on it. But here's the thing: if you just stop for 1 second, you can be aggressive but not foolhardy, right?
That's
the deal.
Good one. Yeah.
So you take just one moment to recognize the design, you'll know there's violations all through every single design on there. First off, the font is like the completely wrong font. It's completely wrong. Then I saw one, like the good one, right? that's on like, one of these websites that you can go to and you submit your PDF or JPEG and it generates a shirt for you. It's a super cheap thing. Yeah. So there's one of those, I forget what it's called, but it's one of those where it's like obviously cheap and the design's wrong. It's backwards. Ours is backwards. The good says is backwards. That's how it's supposed to be. Oh. There's ones all frontwards, like just some person who didn't pay attention is trying to do it. It's real obvious if you take that second to notice it, though. Yeah. So the counterfeit ones, There
you go. So just look out for the counterfeit ones.
Yeah.
They're out there.
Also,
you won't get counterfeit ones at jockostore.com.
Correct. Yeah.
Factually.
Also, Jocko white tea. Is there counterfeit Jocko white tea?
There is not.
Yeah, so that one's going to be a lot harder to counterfeit.
You'd have to put some effort into that one.
Yeah, you'd have to get labels done.
I would actually be kind of impressed if you counterfeited that, like slightly, just in your mode of getting after it would be high level.
Yeah,
because it's not easy to make tea.
No,
not easy to make cans of tea.
No,
and it's not easy to deadlift 8,000 pounds unless you've been drinking your tea. So get some of that.
Organic too, by the way, certified. Just saying. Also, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play and wherever you listen to podcasts, because there's a lot of podcast apps.
There's a lot of podcasts too.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this one, dang, in a way, it's kind of like, man, thanks.
Well, definitely thanks. There's also the Warrior Kid podcast, which is getting a lot of hype right now.
Yeah.
Why? Because we talked about it on the last 2 podcasts ago here. People kind of recognized, and they didn't. This is the thing. I'm not real good at the whole like, hey, everyone, look at what I'm doing. That's not really, I'm like, hey, here's a podcast. If you want to check it out, check it out. So I posted it and talked about it. And so a bunch of people went and check out the Warrior Kid podcast. The feedback is awesome, and I appreciate it. And also, if you want to check out some Warrior Kid stuff, you can check out IrishOaksRanch.com, where Aiden, who's a Warrior Kid, is making soap on his farm just for real. And if you want to get some of that soap, IrishOaksRanch.com. That way you can follow the motto of Aiden's soap, and that motto is stay clean. So check that one out. Also, we got a YouTube channel, which is called Jocko Podcast, and that's where these videos are of this podcast. If you want to see what Dennis Rowley looks like,
how tall he is.
Can you tell that from a video where he's sitting down?
He was kind of going out of frame, like when he'd like sit up. Yeah. So yes,
he's
you can
big
tell.
Dude.
Yeah.
He's a big dude.
Full of aloha, by the way.
Yeah, way full of aloha. But yeah, if you want to see what Dennis Rowley looks like, and you can come on there. You can also see Echo's enhanced videos, as he likes to call them. Sure. He thinks it's an enhancement when he adds stuff to them.
Dang, bro. You think it takes it away?
I think it
takes away from the message.
The raw message is
actually,
just there.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard
really?
that.
People have actually told you that?
Well,
I don't agree with it.
Not to my
I'll
face,
tell you what totally changed my attitude is the Mikey and the Dragons video.
Oh, okay.
That video is sick. The video that you made is sick.
Right. Cool.
And that video, I said to myself, even this is more powerful. Even like, you never really think about, well, you think about it, but like the background music.
Right.
Like when it says the king dies and this like cello kicks in the background, I'm like, dang.
Somber.
Yeah.
Well, that is a good point, and you are kind of advanced in your thinking, because to put it kind of precisely, the goal is, it's not necessarily to be like, hey, what's the background music supposed to be? It's like, what's the feeling supposed to be? And you know how certain instruments or music or whatever will provide certain feelings, and that's kind of the goal, to line them up. That's it. Yeah. So man, you recognize that.
So that video has definitely impressed upon me that videos can have a positive impact and positively enhance, to use your term, what's going on with the words that are in the video.
Yeah. But what about if I put like the walls crumbling and crashing down? See,
and then you just do that over, and every single thing that happens explodes.
Yeah. Does that take away from
the
message?
You were like one of those people that got carried away with CGI on that video.
Yeah.
Which you got to explore the boundaries.
Yes. And sometimes you go outside. I see on a recent video that I did, I'm not going to say which one, but I did the same thing. But now with crumbling and crashing noises and effects, I did it with lens flares. You know what a lens flare is, right?
Oh yeah,
Optical lens flare.
Somebody puts a light in front of the camera.
Yeah, well, it's the aberrations, or I don't know, whatever the word you want to use. That a light going directly at the camera will create these you know,
little.
And you can do it on purpose, right?
Right.
It's like a look. It's like an epic look when you get what's called an anamorphic lens. It kind of does this thing. It compresses it to the side, kind of thing. And then when you, to put in layman's terms, basically when you put
What video did you do this on?
I can't tell you.
Now I'm going to have to go watch all my damn videos.
Yeah, go watch all the videos. You tell me. But here's why I don't want to say it, because now people will be paying attention to it, you know? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, you're right. Because, okay, not to go into a whole long thing, but, okay, so there's a guy named J.J. Abrams. He's a director and I think a writer too. But anyway, he did like the new Star Trek movies. He did the new Star Wars. You know, he's like kind of a sci-fi guy. And people had an issue with the amount of lens flares he allowed in Star Trek, the newer Star. So they're everywhere. I thought it looked dope, man. I really liked that look, but he got a lot of shit for it. Nonetheless, I don't want to be in that same boat with these videos, with that particular video that I'm talking about. So if they don't notice, then good. If so, then bad. See what I'm saying?
I'm gonna go post about it.
Nonetheless,
Psychological Warfare 2, which is an album with tracks where I tell you what you should do to push through the moment of weakness, and that's all we're gonna say about that.
Okay. It works with 100% certainty. I'll add that.
Are you still batting 100% right now? Right now.
Well,
I'm gonna call.
Oh yeah.
You on that?
Oh, 100%.
Really?
Every single time I've ever used it. Here's the thing: I haven't used it recently because it's like.
Are you scared of it?
I didn't need it. I don't have many moments of weakness nowadays. See, I'm like forged in the fire of discipline. No transgressions.
Are you trying to set yourself up to make a video with flair for yourself? That's what I'm feeling.
No. I'm reporting back to you my current status on my discipline. Nonetheless, I haven't had to use it recently. So, yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter. If every single time that I've used it, it helps. Like, what am I going to do? Listen to you telling me and then like, oh, yeah, I'm still good. You know, to me, just making the effort to open my ears to you is you're already like on the way to like power through. Yeah, check. Exactly, right?
Check.
So, 100% on that one in my experience. Also, you want to vary up your workout. Onnit Fitness Gear is at onnit.com. They got a lot of cool stuff on there, a lot of good stuff. So if you want to improve, enhance, increase variables, increase stuff in your workout. If it's getting boring or something like this, go to onnit.com. Get something from there, like kettlebells or rings or battle ropes. I think if you add one or more of those things into your workout, it'll be enhanced greatly, results-wise. That's my opinion. My prediction. Also, books. What do we got?
Well, first of all, we got Mikey and the Dragons. Told you about the video. Go watch the video, and then you'll want to get the book. Why? Because Echo did a really good job. And
thanks, bro.
Because the book is legit. Am I allowed to say that about my own book, or does that make me arrogant?
Yeah, okay. No.
From
you're not
what
arrogant.
I've been told,
it's legit.
Everyone appreciates the book. And a bunch of people have now started posting reviews on Amazon, which is very cool. I appreciate it. I've read them, and I'll read some next time live. But, yeah, so Mikey and the Dragons. Here's the deal. Is it sold out at this moment in time? Yes. Will it be sold out when you hear this? Probably not. Actually, we got more books coming in. Mm-hmm. I'm getting them printed as quickly as they can possibly print them. And I apologize for not correctly estimating how many books everyone would buy. That is my fault, and I apologize for it. But if you do want Mikey and the Dragons, order it as soon as you can so that you can get it as quickly as possible. Also, the Way the Warrior Kid books, Way the Warrior Kid and Mark's Mission. Those books are good for kids and adults and really anyone. And, just got done talking to Dennis Rowley downstairs, and he's like, "Oh, I read those books. They're awesome." So he's a what I don't know how old he is, but he's a Vietnam veteran pilot, and he read Warrior Kids and was down for the cause.
That's weird you said down for the cause, because I was thinking in my head, down for the cause.
Yeah, well, he is, clearly.
Yeah.
You know, down for the cause.
Yep.
Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual.
Good one. Outstanding one, actually.
Really?
I think so. Again, and I said this before, I'm going to say it again, because this is a constant thing. It's like one of those things, like a manual, like an actual manual for life. Right? But so, okay, you said that. I get it. But yeah, you refer to it. That's what you do. It's like a reminder. And we do this all the time, by the way. But this is a good one to just remember, because that's part of the actually, it's the majority of the challenge right there, is to remember this stuff. Like say, hey, you shouldn't freaking drink a soda right now with your sushi. Don't do that. You know that already, but if it's just part of the habit, it's like, boom, you might forget because you're thinking about some other stuff, some edits or whatever that you had to do. See what I'm saying? So you got that manual there this time, and you just refer to it, kind of maybe even daily, semi-daily.
I recommend daily.
Daily, yeah, and you just remember all this stuff. It just keeps you on the path, man.
That one is in print, by the way. There's plenty of them, so you can order that one, and that's a good Christmas gift.
Yeah.
For people that, who needs it in your world. You know what I mean? And I don't think it's insulting. And by the way, if someone is offended by it, just get them to crack it open.
Yeah.
Because they'll realize, like, hey, this isn't meant to offend. This is meant to build.
Yeah. And actually, you know what? Now that you think of it, that book isn't like... Extreme Ownership might be that kind of book that if you get it for someone, they'll be like, what are you saying? Like will elicit, defensiveness.
Yeah.
But the field manual won't. Because like first, when you first see it, you're like, oh, this is an awesome gift item. See what I'm saying? Like looking at it. But it's like, yeah, it's like a cool like field manual. It doesn't scream like you need to take responsibility for stuff. Mm-hmm. That's why you don't get that feel. But even if that person might feel that, maybe you got to do it with like a certain type of card or something. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Thank you for everything you've ever taught me. And then like give it to them. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah.
Check. Well, speaking of Extreme Ownership, there's Extreme Ownership and there's The Dichotomy of Leadership, both books that are about leadership, and they are available, of course. And those are books that will pragmatically teach you how to lead. That's all there is to it. Echelon Front, speaking of leadership, that's our leadership consultancy. We solve problems through leadership. It's me, Leif Babin, JP Donnell, Dave Burke, Flynn Cochran, Mike Sorelli, and Mike Bima. Go to echelonfront.com if you want us to come to your business and align your leadership, or you want us to come and do a keynote speech. Go to echelonfront.com and get the details there. The muster is coming up, 2019, video soon to be released. It's going to be in Chicago, Denver, and Sydney. Yes.
3 musters.
Sydney, Australia. Are you familiar with that area?
Yes.
Yeah. So Chicago, Sydney, and Denver. Check out extremeownership.com. That's where we'll post the details. All of them have sold out, and all of them will sell out. You might not think that in Australia we're going to sell out, but we will.
So you're saying all of them have sold out in the past?
In the past, yes. Oh, sorry, yes. They haven't. These ones haven't sold out yet, but they will. So register early. Everyone down under. Mm-hmm. We know when I was in Brizzy.
Sure, Brizzy.
I was in Brizzy, and we did a little book signing. I did a little book signing, and there was people from all over Australia there. They came to Brizzy.
Did you notice hang out when you were in Brizzy? Mm-hmm. That the Australians tend to do that very thing with words. They'll shorten them and then put an E or an O at the end.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
The Aussies do that with their names.
Right there, Aussies. Boom.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I kind of incorporated that when I've been there twice, right? And yeah, I noticed that and I liked it.
The first SAS guy I worked with, you know what his name was?
What?
Well, there was 2. The first one's name was Dutchie.
Dutchie, what was his whole name?
It was a long Dutch name. And the other one's name was Tomo. And then Nicky.
Right, sure.
So yeah, it's 100%. We're batting 100.
Yeah.
Batting 1,000.
I was doing I guess what would be called a mini documentary one of the times I went there. And one of the guys' name is Jason Robig. He's a black belt under Hicks and Gracie. So it's with him. And he the way he'd explain when people were like, hey, what are you guys doing? He'd be like, oh, we're making a little doco for, for this thing or whatever. And
people understood.
Oh, they knew exactly. And I was like, doco, I like that. It's good. But yeah, man. So yeah, incorporate that into your thing. Make it look cool.
Yeah, Australia, we'll be down there. Chicago, Denver. Also, we have EF Overwatch now. If you're looking to bring experienced and tested leaders into your organization on the civilian side, we've got military, spec ops, and combat aviators that are leaders that have been trained and have been tested, and they're moving into the civilian sector to come and help your company. Go to efoverwatch.com. And if you want to keep, sort of kicking it with us, we're available on the interwebs, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Echo is at Echo Charles, and I am at Jocko Willink. And thanks to all our military personnel out there that are out there protecting our freedom, and to all the vets that have served and have protected our great nation, and a special thanks to HAL 3, the Seawolves, for doing what you did 24 hours a day to support and save troops on the ground. Thanks to all of you, and of course to Dennis Rowley. Thanks for coming on. It's amazing to meet you, and thanks for sharing your history and the history of the Seawolves with us. Can't say that enough. Thank you. Thanks to police, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, correctional officers, border patrol, first responders of all kinds. Thanks for holding the line for us 24 hours a day here at the home front. And to everyone else out there, if you're feeling a little outgunned by the world, think about those words, scramble the Seawolves, and then go out on the attack, no matter the weather or the environment or the enemy fire. You got problems, go in hot and get after it. And until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.